So Alex O'Connor, he's sort of this sort of agnostic philosopher, Oxford trained, was on the Flagrant podcast, and he was talking a lot about these theological issues, which, they get sort of trivial to me at times. But he brought up one dude that I thought would be sort of captivating for you and I to speak on, because it integrates so much of our theological framework about right and wrong, good and evil, and even the nature of what we might call sin. And he brought up in the conversation a classic ethical dilemma. It's called the trolley problem. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take a look at Alex's sort of framing of the trolley problem and how it is a good dilemma to begin a conversation about where do we get our moral sort of compass from of what is good, what is evil. So watch this.
The classic trolley problem is that a trolley is running down a track and there are 5 people either tied to the track or they're workers and they don't know the trolley.
What race?
Jewish.
Run them over. No. Go. 5 people are tied to the track.
And
Okay.
you've got one on the other side.
Yes.
Or one on another track.
Because the track splits, I presume.
Very clever.
Gotcha. Thank you. I'm good at this.
And they've got a lever that you can. It's kind of next to you, and you can pull the lever. And if you pull the lever, 5 people are saved, and the trolley runs over 1 person.
Yeah.
And the question is simply, would you pull the lever? I don't know. Would you pull the lever?
I don't think you pull it.
No?
I don't think so.
Why
Because
not?
now you're responsible for death.
Yeah, because then you are letting 5 people die rather than making 1 person die. And I think letting versus actively doing changes it.
Can we ask
I pull
questions?
the lever.
Okay, go. What about you, Al?
I don't pull the lever. Same reason.
Are we allowed to ask questions about the people, or does that destroy the whole?
Well,
you
the thing
can.
is,
Like age, for example, might be
in
important.
this circumstance, you don't know, right? Or you assume that they're all like 25. But
Got it. They're of
what
equal
you
ages.
can then do once
Yeah.
you work out whether you pull the lever or not is then start changing these variables.
Okay. Give me
And
the toughest
You pull
variable.
the lever?
That really helps.
Lever?
Yeah. Would you pull the lever?
No.
Why
Wait,
not?
what is it? It's going to hit 5.
Going to
and
hit
then it
5,
could hit
and if
1?
you pull it,
If you don't pull the lever, it hits 5. If you pull the lever, it hits 1, but you pull the lever.
Will they all follow me on Instagram? Yeah, I don't think that I could be responsible for it.
Okay, so then here's the thing, right? So one way you could adapt this is say, because at least the 3 of you think that you wouldn't pull the lever. What if it was 100 people on that track? What if it was 1,000 people on that track?
Yeah, eventually you get to
What
the
if it's
number.
like a city? Or what if it was like your own mother? Surely there is some circumstance in which you would kind of be okay with.
So interesting. The trolley problem created by a Harvard ethical professor there. Very cool dilemma. So Brett, would you pull the lever on the track? I mean, to get the conversation going?
I kind of like their stand that they wouldn't pull the lever, but that begs the question: does my lack of action? It's still a moral decision.
That's right.
Right.
Still a choice.
Still a choice, and
To choose to not do
the
something.
outcome
Yeah.
is the same.
That's right.
Only by not pulling the lever, I'm actually, whether they like it or not, they are still responsible for 5 deaths versus 1.
That's right.
So would I pull the lever? Yeah, I would.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the dilemma.
Yeah.
And that's the quandary the dilemma presents to us, because it is a moral decision you're making that is sort of calculative in your own mind. There are 5 people tied on this track. If I pull the lever, 1 will die, and I'll save 5 lives. And he says, what if it's 100? And so you can evolve this dilemma into fitting the subjectivity of ethics. And so that's what I think is beautiful about the trolley problem and what it reveals about our moral sentiments.
Yeah.
Is that if it's 100 people on the track who are they're unbeknownst to them, they're in danger of this trolley smashing into them. But I have the power of pulling the lever to set the trolley on a different track and strike 1. Now, that is what we call utilitarianism. It's where we calculate the result of our actions and which is going to bring more harm versus more benefit. And obviously, at first look, it's better for 1 person to die who's innocent than 100 innocent people to die. So again, to respond to the second guy, he says, I think there's a difference between taking action and letting. No. Either way, you're making a cognitive decision to act or not act. Non-action is just a different type of action. But what if the 1 person on the track that you're pulling the lever is your son.
Yeah.
And there's 100 people on the track. I'm not pulling the lever, you know, and that's the dilemma, and that's the moral sentiment where I would situate. My son is more valuable to me than 100 unknown innocents. So again, if it's your mom or whatever the case may be, someone beloved to you, would you pull the lever?
Who's the famous utilitarian?
John Stuart Mill.
Yeah, right. I wonder if you asked Mills, you know, what would you do? This is your kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he's a purist, right?
He would have to side.
He would have to side with his utilitarian view,
Yeah.
and pull the lever, killing
right.
his son. Yeah.
And again, there's nothing to bring in sort of a theological aspect to that. There's nothing transcendent or divine about the decision one makes in that situation. Louis Poyman was he was a Christian philosopher, a Christian ethicist, but very profound in his writing. He came up with this equation of ethics. He says when we evaluate our right and wrong actions, we use this equation. He called it the MAC, or the Mac equation. So M would stand for my motive for doing something. And the interesting thing about our motives is they're all intrinsic, right? They're internal to us. I can't access your motives as to why you do things. I can ask you about them and hope you're honest and authentic as to why. So motive is one aspect to our ethical equation. But then that leads to A, or A was for action. And actions are typically the things we judge that we see, right? We judge someone by their actions, whether we find that action moral or immoral. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of the public face of morality, what we do. But as we just saw with the trolley problem, many times what determines the ethical meaning or significance of our action is what's the result of our action. I pulled the lever, one person died, and I saved 100. That's what we call C. So C is for consequence. So the outcome of my action. Does it result in greater benefit or greater harm? Mm-hmm. And so utilitarian would say the consequence is what matters the most. Mm-hmm. My action is irrelevant so long as the outcome produces the greatest amount of happiness or goodness, and less. So one person dying versus 100 person getting killed. I mean, do you agree? Like, which one do you think is like the most important aspect of a moral equation, or are they all equally?
Well, if I do, I follow Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So, what Jesus seems to be clearly concerned with is the motivation piece.
Mm-hmm. What's
going on in the human heart, you could say. The consequences, when he talks about consequences as they relate to his ethics, it like he talks about the tower that fell. I think there were Gentiles in the tower, and the tower fell, and the Jews were saying that, well, yeah, it killed Gentiles, you know, and Jesus, if I remember right, just uses that as, it has nothing to do with what they did or didn't do, you know. So I guess I would answer that the most important part for me, as I'm just now sitting here listening to it, would be the motive.
Yeah, that would be, so it's like Aquinas writes a lot about the motive of one's heart, what's inside our heart.
But that's still conditioned on you know, my presupposition that there is God, and that God is represented rightly by Jesus, and so Jesus' teachings are worth following, and then the fact that I'm seeing an emphasis on motive from Jesus. Am I interpreting that right? Maybe I'm not. You know?
Right. Yeah. and that. I mean, it's an important aspect to think about in ethics, right? Because think about an instance where my motive is pure. Let's just take for granted my motive is pure. I want to do this out of some sort of sense of contributing goodness to the world. Mm-hmm. And then the action the world sees me, display is moral. Like there's nothing immoral about what I've done. But the result of that action ends in some sort of devastation. It ends in causing more harm than good in that situation. Would you then say, like, doesn't matter about your motive, it doesn't matter about your actions, what the consequence of those motive and actions were, it ended in people getting hurt or harmed.
And it really wouldn't matter to the world.
Right.
But again, this is, my answer stems out of my beliefs.
Yeah.
That what matters to me more than anything else is my motive, because I believe that matters most to God. So, just to dig a little deeper there, beliefs seem really important here, because I also believe that this life has a teaching purpose to it. Okay, and that life and death is no issue for God. And yes, we're all going to die. The end result will be that every soul will be judged for what? For their actions, or will it be really their motives? So
yeah, that's
where my answer's coming from. And
that's a good point, man. That's a really good point, because I think when you present something like the trolley problem of, do I take action to reduce suffering, even though I will cause a certain amount of suffering? And what you do is you present a flip side to that sort of dilemma, because what most of my students, when I teach philosophy and ethics, morality, critical thinking, when you show them the trolley problem, 90 to 95% of my students are going to say, I'm pulling the lever. I'm going to have the trolley strike 1 and save 5 or 10 or 15, whatever. Because it just makes sense from, again, a moral sensibility. How does that percentage change? I'm just curious.
Well, when you change the dynamic, if it's
their mom or something. I said, but just generally speaking, it gives us a good starting point as to where their moral compass is.
Yeah.
But then you say, okay, great. You made a decision to kill 1 person and save 5 by pulling a lever. Now let's flip the script. Let's say you're crossing a bridge over the tracks. There's no one around. There's no cameras or anything. And there's a runaway trolley again on the track, heading towards 5 people. And there is a large homeless man overlooking the bridge you're crossing where the trolley's coming. And without a doubt, you have all the statistical analysis, you have all you understand physics and everything. This is a very large homeless man. And he's peering over. No one's around. But if I just push him over the ledge, he'll land on the track and the trolley will strike him and stop the trolley before it hits the 5, 10, or 15 other people.
Jeez. Yeah.
Will you push the man? And that's when it's almost absolute zero. And I said, well, wait a minute. The outcome is exactly the same. You killed one and saved 5, 10, 15, whatever it is. But the difference is, one was sort of, I pulled the lever from a distance.
Right.
As opposed to I physically had to shove this guy over.
Yeah.
And so that in itself changes our moral sensibility, even though the outcome is exactly the same. Yeah. But there comes this sort of heightened sense of moral awareness, like, no, I could do that for this outcome, but I won't do the same thing for the outcome because it's too personal.
Yeah.
It's too close. Why do you think that is?
Well, because of proximity. You've talked a lot about this.
Yeah.
It's easy to, usually it's in the context, it's easy to hold a prejudice toward a certain demographic when I have no proximity to anyone in that demographic.
Yeah.
Right. It's easy to condemn a certain practice because I'm not likely to ever have to make a decision concerning that practice.
That's right.
Like abortion, for example, right? But once you have your daughter comes home and she's pregnant, now your proximity's changed.
That's
so
right.
I think the same thing's playing out here, that he is, the kids are resistant to the idea of pushing the guy because they have to actually touch the guy.
That's right.
They have to get in his space,
Yeah. So what it shows is a inconsistency in our moral attunement.
Sure.
We think we're making a decision morally based upon the outcome. But when the outcome is exactly the same, but the action requires a different set of actions, but the same outcome, then again, our moral sensibilities will shift to a more subjective view. And that's what leads me to this question. Is where it gets kind of quite controversial, is that in no way can we say that those different dilemmas that we presented with the trolley problem have any sort of theological construction or divine impetus or command attached to them. The trolley problem, for me, reveals most of our moral judgments and decisions are highly subjective to my own upbringing, my own experience, my own personal beliefs, maybe about God, maybe about...
Yeah.
So what do you say to someone who says all of our morality, our understanding of good and evil, come from God? Like, at the end of the day, the grounding of right and wrong comes from God, what we call the divine command theory. Divine meaning God, command meaning what it is, like it is not suggestive, it is imperative. And it's the theory, like all of our understanding of right and wrong come from God.
Yeah, I don't. My first question would be like, well, where is that command? If
what if people say it's the Bible? The Bible is our source for morality. The Bible is the source.
Then my question still stands, because your view that the Bible is this, let's say your view is this inerrant, perfectly inspired word of God. That's not my view. One of us is right and one of us is wrong. And at least in my own experience, God has never come to me and said, hey, stick to your guns, you're right about this.
Right.
And they're wrong. It's still subjective.
That's right.
Because the Bible has to be interpreted. You don't have any choice in that.
That's right.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this content, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps out the channel, and we'll work very hard to consistently put up this kind of material.
So when you see these people who, again, the totality of their morality is in their theology, that the Bible is the source for all moral decision making, whether we're talking about the morality of my sexual orientation, whether we're talking about the morality of the type of food and cuisine I can consume, or the type of fashion that is morally appropriate to God, or even the morality of what culture might find somewhat strange, somewhat a perversion of what the scriptures actually are trying to do. So we have this group of people up in the Appalachian Mountains who live by what we would call a divine command theory, that all of their faith and trust and theological sort of grounding for their life as well as their morality comes from a literal, fundamental transmission of the Bible. And they have these churches up there where these people handle poisonous snakes as an act based upon their motive to be faithful to God, to show God their faithfulness and trust in Him and the Bible or His Word.
Yeah.
But the consequences often are absolutely devastating, because while their motive may be pure, God, I trust you, I trust your word, my action is I'm going to put that trust in your word to the test. And, well, one of these poisonous snakes bites me. Is that a good thing? So we have a video clip. Let's take a look at this clip and let's see see if it fleshes out.
Any given time, I mean, it could turn around and bite me. But like I said, the Lord, either He'll let it bite or He won't let it bite. He'll let it hurt or He won't let it hurt. You know, it's all up to God.
Roy Lee Christian Jr. is the assistant pastor at another church in West Virginia, the Church of the Lord Jesus in the town of Jolo. He was at the service where his friend, Pastor Walford, was fatally bitten. He's shocked and saddened, but his faith remains the same.
It says, they shall take up serpents. That doesn't mean you have to, does it? Is that your interpretation, that you must take up serpents?
Well, if you believe the Word of God strong enough and you really believe it, and the Lord moves on you, you'll do it.
Back in Tennessee, the 21-year-old pastor says he's been bitten 4 times in 2 years. He says he almost died after the first bite.
Yeah.
So let's do like a little social experiment. I see that this guy holding a very venomous snake in his hand, just nonchalantly. Dude, I'm running the other way. That's just me, the subjectivity of my own morality.
You heathen.
But listen to what he said. Like, rewind the video and listen to what he said. He's holding a poisonous snake in his hand. And what does he say? If it bites me or if it doesn't bite me, it's up to
God.
God commands that.
Yeah.
And if it does bite me and I die, or if I don't die, it's up to
God.
To God. So in other words, whatever takes place is all commanded and directed by God. Like, we look at that holding and jumping and worshiping with a poisonous snake as not just very strange and bizarre, but freaking dangerous. But to them, it's part of their moral construction. It's part of their moral understanding of God is commanding us to do this. Therefore, it doesn't matter what you think about whether or not this is good or bad. We care about what God thinks. And God has said in his word that this is a good thing, that we will take up serpents.
Yeah, but you'll notice that the reporter asked him, it says that they will, but it doesn't say they have to.
And you see his response. He goes,
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that way.
Well, right. You know, and that's the thing, right? The fact is that he and the reporter are interpreting the text differently.
That's exactly right.
So it still ends up being subjective.
And
how do you properly divine from there the perfect moral command of God?
Oof.
How do you do that?
Yeah. It takes me back to, it's an old text that Plato wrote called Euthyphro. What a great name. Thought about naming my kid Euthyphro.
He's got curly hair, too.
He looks like a Euthyphro.
You could just change it up a little bit. Youth with fro.
Youth with a fro. I love it. I love it. But in the story, I'll give you just the summary. Plato, or Socrates, has been accused by the state of Athens, the city-state, of corruption of the youthful minds because he's asking questions. He's basically saying, why do you believe this? Well, this is why. Well, what about this? So he's questioning people's beliefs and traditional ideas about the nature of politics, the nature of ethics, the nature of theology, whatever. And they hate him for it. They hate him because he corners you and he's like, well, that's inconsistent or that's contradictory. So he's on his way into the courthouse because he's being charged. His buddy Euthyphro is coming out of the courthouse. Euthyphro is a lawyer. And he goes, Socrates, what are you doing here? He's like, man, they're charging me with a bunch of bullshit, blah, 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 blah. What are you doing here, Euthyphro? He's like, well, I'm bringing charges. There's been murder in Athens. And Socrates is like, well, what's happened? And he goes, well, a slave has been killed by his owner. And he goes, really? Yeah, left him out, tied him to a post, left him out in the elements to die. And he goes, who did that? And Euthyphro goes, my dad. And Socrates goes, well, wait. Yeah. Wait, you're bringing the charges against your own dad? Why? And Euthyphro goes, because it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing, the pious thing. And Socrates is conflicted. He's like, man, I would never bring charges against my own dad. I'd let someone else do it, but not me. But you have this sort of heightened sense of piety. So he goes, tell me, Euthyphro, what is goodness? What is it? Euthyphro thinks, and he goes, well, goodness is that which is commanded by the gods. And Socrates thinks, and he goes, it's interesting. So whatever God commands is good. And Euthyphro's like, yes. That's what most evangelical fundamentalist Christians believe. Goodness comes from God. It's whatever God commands. So when you read in the Old Testament, hey, you see those Canaanites over there? Kill them all. The women, the children, the animals, kill them all.
Except the virgins.
Except to keep those for yourself. People go, that's an ethical thing to do because God commanded it. So that's where Euthyphro's at. So Socrates asked this very important question, which is, we call it the Euthyphro dilemma. He goes, so is goodness good because God commands it? Or does God command goodness because it's already good? And Euthyphro goes, well, it's got to be because God commands it. So here's the question I ask for my friends listening. What if God commands you to do something? That means it's good, if God's commanding it, right? Mm-hmm. But your own moral subjectivity says, that doesn't sound very good. That sounds kind of immoral, like killing Canaanite women and children. There was a woman in Houston, Texas about 4 years ago who tied her twin babies together, put them in the trunk of a car, and rolled that car into a lake. And I watched the court TV proceedings of this drama unfold. Mm-hmm. And she was beside herself, Brett. She was broken, remorseful, like a shell of a mom. And the whole time she said, God told me to do it. God told me to do it. God told me to do it. And of course, we more civilized, modernized folks say, you're crazy. But yet we read in the Old Testament, Abraham tying up his son Isaac,
that's right.
putting him on the
first thing
altar to cut him in half.
Yeah.
And we celebrate the faith. What's the difference? Like, how is Abraham more holy than this woman? Like, that's a bias. Like, there's no data that support Abraham was more holy because he's in some book. But we call that woman crazy, mm-hmm. but we call Abraham holy. Mm-hmm. But whatever God commands is good. Because we see over and over, replete throughout the Old Testament, God commanding things to be good for this group of people, but yet our moral sensibility is going, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe that wasn't God telling you to do that. Mm-hmm. But now let me flip the script. It's one thing for God to command something to be good and we think it's wrong. But can you think of an instance where God has said, this is bad? Or people have interpreted it as God saying this is bad, but our moral sensibilities go, there's nothing really wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing immoral or ungodly about it. Can you think of anything?
Well, sure. I mean, the notion that homosexuality, the interpretation of that text, which I think is a bad interpretation. Yeah. We talked about that in other videos, but the interpretation that says that homosexuality is a sin and that it's such that they will never see the kingdom of heaven. Yeah. Anyone who has close proximity to, say a gay friend, I'm a heterosexual man, but I'm married and I can't relate to their sexual preference, but I know homosexual couples and they're just as nice as any of the heterosexual couples that I know. They seem just as morally upright as any other person. Yeah. So my proximity changes the way I see them. And I think that that's just naturally human. So, but remember, you started with the qualifier because you have to. Yeah. You said the interpretation of someone's, the interpretation of a certain thing that God supposedly said, and that's just it.
But what if we're wrong? Like, what if the video we just watched, what if those guys up in the Appalachian Mountains are right? Like, put the shoe on the other foot. Like, what if they are the ones who are truly enacting upon a type of faithfulness to God that gets them closer to God or closer to divine by handling those snakes? And
so you got to clarify. Do I know for a fact that they're right? So you're asking me what?
I'm just saying what they're doing goes against our sort of cultural bias.
Yes, it does. But you're asking me, well, what if they're right? Mm-hmm. Well, okay. what if they're right, but I still don't know it? It's not going to change my actions. Because I just think they're interpreting things wrongly, you know?
That's right.
If I know, but see, this gets back to the same problem. How many have ever had God come to them beyond any reasonable doubt and say, stick to your guns, son. This is my command.
Yeah.
Not me.
No. And that's part of the divine command theory's problem, is because Socrates' dilemma is very apropos for us now.
Mm-hmm.
Is goodness good because God commands it? Well, then anything God commands is good, even if your moral sensibility says no. But the flip side of that question is one that often gets overlooked. Or does God command goodness because it's already good? In other words, why do I need God to tell me what is good if it's already good?
Right.
So in that way, that's where I go, you know, driving 20 miles an hour in a school zone appears in 0 books of the Bible.
Yeah.
0. But why did we make that a universal law for our culture and society? Because it's what society and culture deemed as appropriate. Because some a-holes were driving too fast through school zones and striking kids. And we came together as a collective of human, rational, moral beings and said, what can we do to stifle the amount of children being hit by cars going too fast in school zones? Let's make a law you can only drive 20 miles an hour. Boom. Saved countless lives.
Mm-hmm.
But then we said, well, wait a minute. We have these things called cell phones. People are still driving 20 miles an hour, but getting struck by a car 20 miles an hour is still going to do some damage to kids, especially if you're distracted by this new piece of tech. Cell phones don't appear in any book of the Bible.
Nope.
Much less laws determining whether or not they're distracting enough to cause a law to be made for us to stay off of them.
Yeah.
What do? We came back together and said, now there can't be any cell phones, because while people are still driving 20 miles an hour, they're distracted and not aware of the road around it. All that to say, we develop laws based on moral sensibilities without any sort of divine intervention or divine input, right? We come together
That
as
we can tell anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There's no data that support God gave some man this vision for 20 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. We came together because someone lost a child and said, this hurts, and we need to rectify this.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems as though the fundamentalists and the evangelical side have no sort of, they agree with certain laws, but at the end of the day, when these divine commanded laws that have been interpreted cause so much harm and so much damage that they don't even have the moral compass or sensibility to say, man, that interpretation is really hurting some folks. The way I'm interpreting the scripture, is there another way that we can hermeneutically evaluate this text and be true to our following of Jesus, but not so oppressive to the other?
Yeah.
And that's where I think we evangelicalism is failing. It's like they are digging their heels into this divine command theory based upon, again, very speculative hermeneutics and interpretations of the Bible. Whereas if we just sit back and we go, come, let us reason together that there's nothing wrong. God, according to your translation or your hermeneutic, your interpretation, you're calling this homosexuality bad. You're calling premarital sex bad. You're calling these things bad, when the moral compass and sensibility that I have says there's nothing intrinsically bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because last I checked, heterosexuality is prone to tendencies toward perversion, just as homosexuality is. You know what I'm saying? There's no differentiation between that. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with premarital sex, so long as it's done consensually and there's love involved and things like that. I understand there's psychological aspects to it, But anything taken in excess can be harmful. You drink too much water, guess what? You're going to die.
And if marriage is the only thing, like a lawful marriage is the only thing that makes it suddenly righteous,
Yeah.
then a husband can rape his wife, and it's still just sex within the bounds of marriage.
Well, God called that good in Deuteronomy, right?
Yeah.
Deuteronomy 28. A man rapes a woman, he's to take her as property and to be his wife.
Yeah.
And so that brings up, if God is divinely commanding goodness, through what mode is that? And most people would say the Bible. And yet we have so many inconsistencies and contradictions in that book. It would be hard pressed for me to say, yeah, just a basic reading of those texts is going to give me a moral grounding for my life. Like we have a constitution that is, pretty amazing document, but we've even had to amend that thing over time to make room for cultural evolution and social growth and understanding and our own sense of moral.
It's part of the brilliance of that document.
That's right. That it's and I think the same way with the Bible is there are certain ways in which we can interpret particular text, not just in the context of the historical, cultural, social setting, but in the setting of what is the principle, like Rohr says, what is the principle that is true here? Not literally, but literarily. And that's what we search for, at least at Suncoast. We're looking for the principle that resonates through time that we can apply here, as opposed to a strict literal interpretation. This is exactly what happened. Because we look at all these inconsistencies in the Bible, like the creation story, Genesis 1 and 2, absolutely different.
Yep.
Man is made on the sixth day, whereas he's made first in the second creation story.
The chronology is totally
man and woman
different.
are made together in the first story. In Genesis 2, woman comes from man later. So that's it. Dude, I don't care how you cut it. That's inconsistent.
Yeah.
That's two different stories. And you have to do a lot of freaking intellectual sleight of hands and jumping through hoops to try to correlate that. So if we're putting so much pressure on a text, do you think we're creating an expectation from the Bible that was never meant to be?
Yes. So
Regarding morality is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, okay. Regarding morality, yes, I think we are placing an expectation on the text that was never meant to be there. But here again, I'm making that statement based on my interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
Right? They're making their statement based on a different interpretation of reality. In their reality, and therefore their motive, is connected to their belief that God commands it, that makes it good.
There you go.
So I said earlier that I think motivation is the most important thing. Right? But this calls that into question, doesn't it?
Yep.
Maybe.
Because at the end of the day, you have to say most of the fundamentalist evangelicals are not interested in the data. They're interested in defending their dogma, which is at all cost, I must stand on my belief that the Bible is inerrant, that the Bible is univocal, that the Bible is immutable, all these things. So in other words, what they do is they're defending the dogma as opposed to the overwhelming data that is present as to what the scriptures are and how they should be employed in our faith.
Yeah. But I guess what I'd like to say to people that take that stand is, really think about it. Is God? If God is, then God is what God is. Larry will love that.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change.
No.
If it turns out that I'm right or wrong about this book. And if you really this is just objective fact that our ethics built on either the divine command theory or not,
Right.
is subjective.
Yeah.
That's where the data lands there.
So-
So
Yeah.
think it through. Just think it through. And now I'll get into my opinion. Okay.
Yep.
So psychologically, what I see going on there is this human kind of evolutionary need to create a sense of certainty, even when there is very little
Yep.
certainty, because we're constantly looking for ways to be safe, to survive this reality. And so we tell ourselves stories, But there's a lot of value in thinking more critically.
Yep.
It burns more calories.
That's right.
It's not easy,
Yes.
but there's a ton of value. The reason that we are at the top of the hierarchy, I guess you could say, on the evolutionary ladder, isn't because we're faster, got bigger claws and teeth. It's because we have this ability, this weird ability to think critically.
That's it. And here's what I found. I'm going to use a Boudreaux Thibodeau joke to kind of frame it. Boudreaux is dying. He's on his deathbed. He knows he's at the end. And his wife, Marie, comes over to his bedside. She's rubbing his head, giving him cold water or whatever. Just trying to comfort him as best she can. And Boudreaux looks at her. He goes, Marie, you going to start dating somebody when I die? And Marie goes, oh, Boudreaux, you don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about that now. I'm here for you now. Let's just focus on this. Marie, yeah, Boudreaux. You going to let him cook in my kitchen with my pots and pans when I die? Boudreaux, you don't have to worry about that right now. Marie, yeah, Boudreaux. You going to let him sleep in his bed? You going to let your new man sleep in his bed when I'm dead? Boudreaux, you don't have to worry about that right now. Marie, yeah, Boudreaux. You going to let him drive my truck? No, Boudreaux. Why not? Because he don't know how to drive a stick. So it's like she knew all along, deep down, but she's doing her best to just hold the line. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I think what I found with some evangelicals, but mostly with my friends who are in academia, would be self-described atheists or agnostics, after the second or third beer, their level of certainty gets sort of remedial. And they go, man, I don't know. Yeah, there's some interesting philosophical quandaries about God, and ultimately what they say is, I don't believe in that God. That kind of God just doesn't make any sense.
The straw man God. Yeah.
But that's why one of my good buddies, he said this. It was such a powerful statement. He goes, Troy, let me put it to you philosophically. He goes, intellectually, I'm agnostic, which means if I'm being intellectually honest, I can't know one way or the other with a level of certainty that gives me comfort. But ontologically, existentially, I live as though there isn't a God. I live atheistically. He goes, I can never be an atheist intelligently or intellectually, but ontologically I can. I can just live my life. I don't go to church. I don't pray. I don't do these things. And it doesn't seem to alter the happiness I experience in the world. And the same thing could be said to some fundamentalists, right? After the second or third beer, you start pulling up the inconsistencies and the contradictions in the Bible, and really what Jesus is trying to kind of situate on earth, that the kingdom of heaven is in you. Father and I are one, and my prayer is that all of you suckers become one like we are one. In other words, there's room for you here when you begin to not believe in me, but become like me. And that blows their mind. They're like, you might be right. It's like, Marie, yeah, I do have a boyfriend, but I can't really tell you about him. You don't know how to drive a stick. At the end of the day, most evangelicals, even pastors, I hate to say this because we don't talk smack about other churches, but most pastors around here have degrees from some seminary where answering the correct way determine your grade. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You want to pass my modern theology class? Well, you better think Karl Barth's a heretic. You know,
Yeah, right.
If you want to pass this intro to ethics class, you better believe that the Bible is the source of morality. And so our answers were always dictated by passing the class. And so you have to answer in a particular way. That's why I did my PhD at a secular university, because I was like, I want to answer truthfully, not just from my own bias, you know?
Right.
So
is this an objective truth that we should seek what is true? But that's what is morally right. That's what is good.
I think truth is like love. Like I love what the Song of Solomon says. Do not awaken love until it so desires. Do not seek truth until you so desire it. Because even just a practical stand, like sometimes withholding truth is the best truth. You know, like when a cop goes to a parent's house where a child has been in an automobile accident, and the cop knows your child's dead. The parents are like, is my child okay? Is my child okay? Cop will not answer. He'll say, ma'am, we need to get you to the hospital. The doctors will answer these questions right now. He knows the truth. And Jesus says, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, right? Well, there's a little caveat. I parenthetically insert, you will know the truth, and the truth you know is going to set you free. But there's a withholding of truth that's often more morally necessary, like in that instance.
Yeah.
The truth will be discovered, but now you don't really desire that right now. I know you think you do, but there's an appropriate time. And I think that's the ecclesiastical idea, right? There's appropriate time for everything. There's going to be an appropriate time where you will be confronted with the truth, and you have to decide whether you're going to accept it or reject it. And you could talk to an evangelical until you're blue in the face and show all the inconsistencies, all the contradictions in the Bible. You can show all of the philosophical and theological writings throughout history that point to there's also another way of thinking about God that is incongruent with yours, but just as possible, just as likely, and probably a little bit more less toxic. And they will look at that truth and go, I'm not ready for it. I'm not ready for it.
Yeah.
You know, but I think to say searching for truth as an objective type of truth, I think it's just a fundamental reality of human conditions is we want truth. We want the truth, but too many times we want it on our own terms, you know.
Which isn't necessarily the truth.
That's right. So while seeking for truth may be a universal and objective human tendency, it is not a human necessity because we see it lived out. Truth is not necessary for people.
No. Yeah.
Which is scary.
Well, so far it hasn't been necessary. But who knows?
That's right. Yeah. I think that's a good way to close it, is to say seeking truth is a human tendency, but accepting the truth is not a necessity at all. We have a tendency, but not a necessity, because we see people hurting people all the time in the name of God. You know, we see sort of theological frameworks in overseas conflicts that end in the decimation of one people because they're different. You know, it's horrible. But again, it comes back to what is the grounding of our morality? I think there may be some work to be done as to how our rationality can be tied to some nature of divinity. Because what do we say here at Suncoast? What is God's word? Whatever's true. And we've already seen truth can be discovered through just pure rational thought, experimentation, observation. And so that, I think there's some work that could be done there to tie that rationality to a type of divinity. Because boy, when the faith card gets played by, well, it's faith. What is, they quote Hebrews, faith is the evidence of
things unseen
and the hope of things to come.
Yeah.
And I go, well, good luck, with some of that. But anyway, I think this is an important conversation, man, to talk about grounding our ethics, our sense of morality, of good versus evil, only in hopes that we can clear some of the blurry lines as to who is evil. Because you know what I say, at the end of the day, when we talk about ethics, it's not
or
what...
add blurry lines.
Yeah.
Blur some of the lines.
Blur some of those lines. Yeah. I like that. Because at the end of the day, morality or ethics is not really about what is right and wrong, but who decides.
Yeah.
And so it's a good way to end with a good question to contemplate.